For the afternoon's program, we are pleased to facilitate a hearty grand forum welcome to members of GVSU's senior leadership team, or as we like to call them, the SLT. It's comprised of the university's top leadership, the president and the provost, who you heard from this morning, as well as our vice presidents, who are responsible for basically the strategies, the investments, and the priorities of the university, and the rest of us work to also make sure that those are happening. So Grand Forum has had, over its many years of existence, the opportunity to hear from several of these leaders. I think we were founded by several of these leaders. I know Ron Van Steelen was one of our former presidents, vice presidents that was here. Don and Nancy Lovers continue to be a big portion of that. So as we were working with the board and others to think about programming for this year, we wanted to ensure that you had the opportunity to meet some of our newest leaders that are here and have an opportunity to hear from them about the vision, as well as for you to share a little bit about your vision of community leaders as folks that really embody one of the tenets of Reach Higher, which is lifelong learning. There is no greater example in my mind of what it is to be committed to lifelong learning than all of you. And so to share some of the history of not only this program, but of lifelong learning, as well as West Michigan. As you'll learn, some folks are new to the area, and I think I have been blessed as the transition of Grand Forum has happened to alumni relations, that you are so generous in allowing us to understand the importance of this place and what you carry forward. So we hope that you will have that opportunity today. Today we have 4 of our 8 vice presidents joining us to share their stories and vision for the future of GVSU and our community, and we look forward to hearing from each of them. Just a few housekeeping notes on how this will work. We will start the program by sort of allowing each leader to tell us a little bit about their journey and their story of how they came to Grand Valley and to West Michigan, or back to West Michigan, as well as a little bit about the work that they're responsible for within the university. And then we will move on to questions and answers. As of this morning, you still have some cards on your table. We also have microphones. I know none of you are shy with your questions, so we will have a few questions to get the conversation started, and then we will turn that over to each of you. So please help me first and foremost by giving a hearty Grand Forum welcome to each of our panelists. And I will start with our Vice President of Development, Laura Aikens. And Laura, you recently returned to West Michigan after about 20 years in cities and doing work around the U.S., most recently with almost a decade, 7 years in Chicago, doing some work in a consultancy there. Can you just share with us what about Grand Valley and West Michigan drew you back to our community?
Yeah, absolutely. So great to see you all again from this morning. I got the opportunity to meet a few of you at lunch, so that was some great time spent together. I did just come back to West Michigan. I had spent 20 years in Southeast Michigan, in Pittsburgh, in Austin, in San Antonio, in Windsor, Ontario, Canada. And when I departed West Michigan back in 2002, I didn't anticipate coming back, but I could not resist the opportunity to both elevate my professional life by joining the Grand Valley team and reconnect with the place that I called home for so many years and be back with my parents, my siblings here in West Michigan. And when I think about some of the reasons why I chose to return here from the work that I was doing, which was work that I deeply loved, there's a couple of things that really stand out for me. One is the impact that Grand Valley has had on my family. I was talking during lunch that my uncle graduated in the class of 1969. My mother graduated in 1975. My brother received his degree from Grand Valley a little bit later on in life, or a little bit later on down the chronological history of the university in 2004. And my sister has her master's degree. So, there was this familial connection that made me curious about Grand Valley. But what really drew me back was not its history, but its future. I had the great privilege of having Grand Valley as a client when I was a consultant. And I got to have a look at the inside operations and said, that's the place I want to be. I'm really excited about the opportunities we have in our community and just couldn't say no once I had the opportunity to join this fantastic team. So, little snapshot.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thanks for being here. Stacie, you are next. So Stacie Behler is our Vice President and Chief Public Affairs and Communications Officer, as well as Secretary of the Board of Trustees. And I am looking down because that is a long title, and I wanted to make sure that I got that. Stacie, unlike Laura, you've been in our community for quite some time, but outside of higher education, and I know you've had the opportunity to share with folks in some places that I have been in about how you were drawn to higher education and how you wanted to end up here as you were looking at how your career progresses. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey to Grand Valley and higher education?
Sure. Well, I'm honored to be here, excited to talk with all of you. Yes, I'm in my almost third month here at Grand Valley State University. It's been an absolute exciting ride. I've been in West Michigan for more than 25 years. I'm a recovering attorney and started my career here in Grand Rapids at a medium to large size law firm. And then in early 2000s, had the pleasure to go to work for Meijer. Hopefully some of you have heard of that company and shopped our stores and continue to shop our stores. And just had a wonderful career at Meijer and working for the Meijer family. And then decided to take a little bit of an early retirement when I met a phenomenal, innovative leader named Dr. Philomena Mantella, and she inspired me not just to recognize the importance of the legacy of Grand Valley, but to also be inspired by its future, and I wanted to be a part of that. And so I did kind of retire a bit earlier than I thought I would from Meijer. Little bittersweet, but I'm excited to be a part of this institution. I knew that I would end my career working for a place like Grand Valley in higher ed. I was a first-generation college student. I went to Oakland University over on the east side of the state. And worked full-time, went to college at night, and really going to college changed my life. It completely changed the trajectory of the success that I've had, and I knew that I would one day want to get back to higher ed to try to have a similar impact on students that faculty and staff had on me when I had the opportunity to go to college. And so I'm delighted to be back here to serve as the university's advocate, cheerleader in chief, although I think the provost sees herself that way too, which is a great competition to have. The more cheerleaders, the better. But I'm excited to continue to tell the amazing stories of Grand Valley, which includes each and every one of you in this room. So thank you. Look forward to questions.
Wonderful. And next we have Vice President for Student Affairs, Jenny Hall-Jones. And Jenny, much like me, your entire history had been with your alma mater, where I believe you got your undergraduate degree and some graduate degrees, and had worked for many, many years. And I won't steal your thunder, but I thought you might be working for the entirety. So what was it about Grand Valley that lured you away from this place that had your heart and called home since high school?
Yes, so I grew up in Ohio. I will put that out there. Some people hold that against me. I hope you won't. But I spent my kind of formative years on the Lake Erie in Northeast Ohio. And then when I went to college at Ohio University in Athens, Ohio, the Bobcats, not the Buckeyes, just want to, again, put that out there. I went there because it was the cheapest public institution I could go to that had my major. So a public access regional institution has always been near and dear to my heart as a first-gen college student. And so for me, I wasn't looking for a job. I spent 30 years at Ohio University. My first job was a Pell Grant student worker in the library. So I did work study in the library. And my last job at Ohio University was I was the interim vice president for student affairs, and I was loving it. And I really thought I was going to be the VP of student affairs there. I had spent 10 years previously as the dean of students. And I knew I wanted to be a VP. I thought I was going to be a VP at Ohio. And this search firm reached out to me about Grand Valley. And when you get to that level, you get a lot of search firms that reach out to you. And almost every time I would say, thanks for but no thanks. I love my alma mater. I'm working at my alma mater. But I would give them names of other people that I thought would be great for that particular job. So I look at Grand Valley, And I had some students that had come out of Grand Valley who worked for me in student affairs at Ohio. And so I'd heard good things about it. I dug a little bit deeper. I read about Dr. Filomena Mantella, who has a higher ed and kind of student affairs enrollment management background. And I thought, oh, I'd worked for one other president in my years at Ohio, and he was my favorite, and he had a student affairs background. And I missed having that connection with the president who kind of really understood the work that we do in student affairs. I thought, oh, that's exciting. I could really work for her. I feel like I could work for her. And I'd never had a female president either, and I was excited about that. So I was like, oh, I'm not going to put my name in the hat, though, because I'm really happy, and why would I leave my alma mater? And so I said no to the search firm, but what I didn't do is I didn't give them any other names. I was like, just in case I decide to change my mind, I didn't want any competition. So, it was true. It was a little, so there was definitely something there. And I think those folks that I talked to also thought that there was something there, because like the day or two before the deadline, they came back to me and they said, are you sure? It doesn't hurt anything to put your materials in, right? So I ended up putting my materials in. And then it got serious when I was asked to do kind of the initial screening interview. I was asked to come up to Detroit to do what they call an airport interview. And I thought, okay, this is real. Like, I really have to decide, am I going in or am I not going in? So I decided to come, and my husband Scott and I, we love Michigan. We vacation, but more like northern Michigan. We hadn't really visited West Michigan. And so we did like the secret shopper trip. So we, instead of going to Detroit, I'm from Southeast Ohio. Instead of just going to Detroit, we went to Grand Haven, spent the weekend in Grand Haven, and then took M45 in, explored campus, like went into the Kirchhoff Center, checked out the Student Center, checked out the library, came into the cities. I didn't really understand, actually, the Pew campus at the time. I needed to do more homework. I was like, why are these buildings with the name on them everywhere in the city? Got to Detroit, did my interview, and that whole experience, we could just start, it was just the beginning, right, where you just start seeing yourself in a place. And then when I had my on-campus interview, I honestly just fell in love. And I just kept seeing myself here. When I was getting ready to say goodbye, I was like teary-eyed because I thought, what if I never see these people again? Like, I felt so connected to the community and the place and the space here that when, I didn't even wait for Philly. She loves telling this part of the story, so I will make sure I tell it. But Scott and I had spent many sleepless nights because I'd said, I think if I get this job, like if they offer it to me, I think I'm gonna take it, which from somebody who's been at the same institution for 30 years as a student and through my professional years, was a really, really, really hard decision. And so when Philly actually called me and offered me the job, I said yes right away, like right away. Because she said, if you feel like you might be interested, I'll have the paperwork drawn up. And I was like, I think you can draw the paperwork up. I'm coming. And she said, don't you need to talk to somebody? Like, didn't you say you had a partner that maybe you want to discuss this with? And I'm like, no, we're in. We're all in. So she says that like one of her first lessons is in negotiation. But like, I was just so happy to be here. And that was last December. So I'm on my 8th, 9th month now. I officially moved in January to Grand Valley Apartments. So I lived on campus for the spring semester, which was really fun. And then my husband, he was a 4th grade teacher, so he finished out the school year, and he joined me in June, and we moved into our house in West Olive in June and July, and I'm telling you, this place is perfect. I know I haven't really experienced winter yet, but it's worth it. The summer is worth it. So thank you all so much. The community has been incredibly welcoming to me and my family, and I'm just so happy to be here.
Wonderful, thank you. And last but certainly not least is our Vice President for Information Technology and the Chief Digital Officer, Milos.
They're a tough act to follow. And I want to address the photo, the PowerPoint as soon as I start. Always a renegade. Why do I have a different background? I have to figure that out and get an updated photo. So I've been here for about 2 years, and after these introductions, I feel like I'm a senior vice president because I've been here longer. all joking aside, I've been in Jersey, Hudson and Bergen counties, right outside New York City for about 22 years. And about 3 years ago, my family and I sat down and said, there's got to be something more to life than 3 hours in a car to go 9 miles. So I was a finalist at a university down in Virginia, in Williamsburg. Did not work out. That I was approached by a Fortune 100 company to run their higher education vertical. Man, am I glad that one didn't work out. And then out of nowhere, this executive recruiter came up and approached me with 3 separate Midwestern universities in order, and Grand Valley was the last. And the only one that really made sense. It was very exciting. President Mantella's leadership and vision encouraged to try something new. And then the more I learned about the community, West Michigan, Grand Rapids, other leaders, faculty, staff, alumni, the more I asked myself, why isn't this kind of hidden jewel really nationally known, and what can we do to help? I think there's a great community connection that we have, but I think we have everything here, all the ingredients that are necessary to really bring value to a larger number of people coast to coast. So having been here for 2 years, love it, it's amazing, it's great. And as we were leaving Jersey, I didn't want to just leave from a place, I wanted to go to something. And I wanted to go to something better and something that's exciting and something that energizes you when you wake up in the morning, no matter how long your list of meetings looks and how often it changed between midnight last night when you looked at it and 7 a.m. the next morning. So I'm very honored and excited to be here, and I look forward to speaking with each of you and answering any questions that I may have.
Well, thank you for those wonderful introductions and a little peek into your personalities and why you've joined this institution. I'm going to start off with just a few questions to get the conversation rolling, and then we'll turn it over to each of you. So I'm looking probably at Stacie and Laura for this first question. So GVSU is a relatively young university compared to many higher education institutions, and one that was founded, we talk often, by the community, for the community. In my mind, Grand Forum was founded in recognition of these community-centric origins. From your perspectives, can you talk a little bit about the ways that this origin story has sort of shaped the university, made it unique, and how do you see this impacting and continuing and evolving the university forward? So.
Well, I can start. You know, I've been a Grand Valley fan since I moved to Grand Rapids. Although it is not my alma mater, I would often recognize as the executive director of the Meyer Foundation in a position to counsel the Meyer family around philanthropy, that Grand Valley always seemed to punch far above its weight class, that the impacts it was having on our community were far more pervasive than many of the other institutions that the foundation was, getting requests for funding from. And so, the decision to come here was in part based on, I believe, an ownership and a pride of the entire community in this space, whether you were a student here or a faculty member or part of staff. The whole community feels like this is their place. And as the chief communications person, there's no better place to be than a place where you have a whole community speaking on behalf of the university in a positive way and feeling a sense of ownership. And so I think it is our secret sauce. It is what differentiates us from other institutions, not just in Michigan, but I would say across the country, that we have this joint ownership and pride in this institution because of its impact on our community. Whether you're an alumni or not, you feel like this is your institution. And so I just think it's an amazing benefit for us moving forward for the rest of the future of Grand Valley.
I agree. I do think that this institution is unique. When I was working in consulting, I worked in consulting for a dozen plus years, working with organizations on their strategic plans, on fundraising plans, on transformational campaigns. And so over a 12-year career, would work with anywhere between 10 to 15 different organizations a year. So you get to see a pretty big expanse of what's happening in the nonprofit world. And when I came across, had the privilege of working on the work with Grand Valley, I knew the story of Grand Valley, but I didn't know the story of Grand Valley. And it was an opportunity to really dive into it and understand what are its unique characteristics. And the Board of Trustees has said, and I agree with them, the community is our superpower. You called it secret sauce. The community is our superpower, and this is something that the leaders of the institution have understood for decades. And I mean, I think right back to Don Lubbers, he understood that this university would be as strong as the community is strong, and that the reverse would be true. And that in order for us to succeed together, we needed to be together. And I think the other thing that I really think about when I think about the community in Grand Valley is this sense of we can do it. If we can come together, if we can rally around a particular cause, there's really nothing that's stopping us. And that's been true of West Michigan. I think it's been true of Grand Valley, and I think it's even more true as I think about the future that we're crafting together. So totally agree with you. I think that community is a unique asset for this university, and I think we have a tremendous opportunity to really double down on that moving forward.
Other thoughts? Perfect. Jenny, I'll direct this towards you, but please, anyone can join in. So Grand Valley was founded in the 1960s, and that's during a time that we often think of a lot of social movements, you know, from the anti-war movement to the women's movement to civil rights. And many sort of compare the time that we're living in now with other social and racial justice movements, Me Too and Black Lives Matter and all of that, to that time. How do you think these larger societal issues are shaping the learners we serve? So part one. Part two is how has that changed over time? And you can use those experiences from Ohio, but understanding how that impacts us here. And number three, which I think is the crux of the work that we do, is how are we preparing those learners to serve, that we serve to tackle these larger systemic issues as they move through GVSU?
That's an easy question. It's fine. I can totally handle that off the cuff.
I'm glad you were asked.
Well, one of the things that I love about Grand Valley, you know, my former institution was founded in 1804. And so coming to Grand Valley and having it, you know, our first graduates for 67, I think. 67 was the first class. You think about the generational shapings, and sometimes institutions of higher education, we get stuck in our ways and we have a hard time changing. We were born in a time of national change, and I think that's fascinating. And when you think about the GI Bill in like the 1940s, it opened up higher education for an entire classes of people that higher education had never been open to before. And so then in the 60s, with this time of change, we're like one generation in to the fact that everyone can kind of come to college now, right? Not everyone went to college in the 60s, but it's continued to grow, like who goes to college, right? And who has the opportunity to go to college. And that's kind of where we are now. And I think about the fact that we were so nimble back then, and we were created in that kind of energy of change and of social and national like unrest and change, that I feel like that's just in the core of Grand Valley. I come from a place where, as the dean of students, I was one of only 2 female deans of the institution. I sat around the vice president's table, and everyone, I think me and the chief of staff were the only women, and everyone was white. And I come to Grand Valley, and we are incredibly diverse at leadership table, and I think that was part of how we were founded. It was part of our core. So in some ways, we are showing the students what it means like to be an inclusive space, and that's just normal to them, hopefully that feels very normal to them. The other thing that I think about Grand Valley, which is really just kind of fun, is it's not about how we're preparing the students for this national conversation. They're changing us every day, and they're preparing us. So the students that are maybe getting excited about something and protesting, they are the ones that are telling us as student affairs practitioners, as higher education leaders, we need to pay attention, and what do we need to do differently to make sure that we're serving our students better. So I feel like they're changing us more than we necessarily are preparing them. I would like to think that we're preparing them to be open-minded, and we do all kinds of programs. I mean, that's part of what college is about. But for me, I think about how much of the students changed me and changed the way that we lead. And I feel like that's been the core of Grand Valley. So I've only been here 8 months. Would anyone else like to add to that perception?
I likewise was very happy that question didn't belong to me, Jenny. I think you did a great job. Great
Okay.
job.
All right.
Yes, thank you
Happy
very
to
much.
have dialogue about that.
We continue to have dialogue, the center of civil discourse, right? Opening those difficult conversations. And I was talking to a couple individuals this morning about just, the timbre and how sometimes media keeps us all amped up and angry, and that's sort of how we interact, and the role of higher education and programs like this and keeping us informed and figuring out how to differ and have differing opinions in a way that's respectful and encompassing of a variety of opinions is I find that one of the joys of being in this environment on a regular basis, so thank you for that. Maybe Milos or Jenny might want to tackle this one. So GVSU benefits from being an institution that is keenly aware of its roots. So we just talked a little bit about that, while being firmly focused on its future. Where do you see opportunities for Grand Valley to lean into its strengths and lead among higher education institutions? And what unique value proposition do we offer to learners as they embrace their own unique futures?
Sure. When Kara was answering the AI question, I was going to say I can jump in. I think values and core principles matter, and there's a lot of things historically that have been proven true for decades, or in some universities for centuries. And those should be respected, admired, and incorporated in everything we do as we move forward. On the other hand, it's that, push and pull relationship between where we were to where we are, and more importantly, to where we're going. And it's important not to always live in the past. I think we have some areas for improvement. We have some opportunities to bring things forward in a different way. I think I'm a huge supporter of leading forward instead of not following what 4,200 other universities are doing, because that's not exciting. Anybody can do that. Why don't we take a machete and go through the woods ourselves and come up with a better way? How do we reduce 6-year graduation rates, time to degree? I think it's too long. I've said that. We can look at costs. We can look at how we perhaps function 12 months out of the year. Are we operating at full capacity? Are we really providing services to our students that they need in today's competitive world? And the growing number of competitors in different fields and different companies, organizations is growing every single year. So I think it's important to be rooted in who you are and the values that define us as a community. But it's important to be flexible in delivery and execution on our path to whatever our North Star may be. So we have a lot of opportunities. We have great facilities. I've been in some universities in the Northeast that would give anything and everything to have what we have, because a lot of their buildings are 100 years old, and it shows. At one point in my life, which I try not to remember too often, I was also responsible for facilities in addition to technology. So I got those calls when the roof is leaking, or this thing doesn't work, or there's no power to the building. So we have a lot of opportunities to build upon. We're in a great location, great community, and I just think at times what I would like, this is from somebody who comes from Jersey and then Southeast Europe before that, I wish we were a little bit bolder at times and a little bit more risk-prone to experiment, try some new things. We're going to fail, and that's okay. We're going to get up, we're going to dust ourselves off, and we're going to do it again. And I think that's what higher ed needs today.
Agreed. Other thoughts?
I want to talk about the value proposition. So if you're paying any attention to the media these days, you're hearing a lot of discussion about the cost of education, how expensive it is for students now to attend a 4-year college or even 2-year community college degree. And I think, to Milos's point, one of the great opportunities we have is to lean in on our value proposition. We have been since the 60s, since our inception, such fantastic stewards of the funding we get from the state, the funding we get from philanthropists, and especially the funding we get from our students and their families. And so really telling the story of the value that students get from a degree at Grand Valley, not just what they're paying for and experiencing in the time that they're here at Grand Valley, but that they stay in Michigan, that they become immediately employed in good jobs and begin to give back to our community and become part of our community. I think our numbers, and there was an article in today's Detroit News about students staying in Michigan after achieving a degree from any Michigan university, and how Grand Valley is among the top in the 80-something percentile of students staying in Michigan after graduating. And I think one of the things I'm committed to is really to telling the story of value and the financial stewardship that Grand Valley has always been a leader in, but how we will continue to lead there. Because I think it's the question on students' minds and their families' minds as they make decisions about where to invest money for their degrees.
I want to add something to that one because I've got Kara and Troy right in the audience. And the mantra that we have of like career early, career often, and it's kind of like career forever with our lifelong learning focus. I think what's really different about us is we say, come to us. Be our students at Grand Valley, but be our students forever, because you're going to stay in Michigan, and we are going to be your educational institution. So if you want to come back for your master's degree, you want to come back for a certificate, you want to learn, like in the Grand Forum, we are your educational partner for the rest of your lives. And we're saying that when students first get here, all the way up through, and we're trying to get new partners in those relationships as well. That is really unique. And I feel like we're on the cutting edge, and when our students graduate from this institution with their undergrads, we already give them money to come back. That is incredibly unique. So talking about being innovative, and then also that return on that value proposition, it's amazing. And two of the people who do that great work are sitting in this room with you.
And we think about that often, and I think, the commitment that we've always had to a return on investment is changing, and understanding there are new learners and there are learners that are coming back in different ways. It may be just to upskill, it may be a course, it may be a series of courses. It's not necessarily always an investment in a huge degree. It's just these continuing things. So that sort of tees up, thank you very much, Jenny, my last question here, which is, we learned a little bit about GVSU's new strategic plan, Reach Higher 2025, and one of the commitments within that is a commitment to lifelong learning. You heard that addressed this morning. I think you've heard that addressed here. And so I was just wondering if one or all of you might want to tackle a little bit about what that commitment means to you and how that helps shape the work that you're doing in each of your areas before we sort of turn it over. As I mentioned from the get-go, I do not think there's a greater example of what lifelong learning is and can be. And so how do we continue to have groups like this that help reflect and strengthen that commitment?
I'm happy to get us started. So when I think about Grand Forum, being very new to Grand Valley, this is my first time having the opportunity to experience Grand Forum. And I have the unique privilege, and how this got to be an area that reports to me, I'm not sure, but the Hauenstein Center for Presidential Studies reports up through development. And when I, first became aware of Grand Forum and prepping for this conversation, conversations previous to that, I identified how synergistic that is with what we're trying to achieve through the Hauenstein Center and through a commitment to being there for the community as they want to continue to learn. I think about the Padno-Sorosik Center for Civil Discourse and the opportunities that exist there. This is just one more example, I think, of the great work that Grand Valley is doing to support its community. Do we have lessons to learn from you? Do we have lessons to learn from the participants in all of those experiences? Absolutely we do. But I do consider it a unique privilege to have the opportunity each and every week to think about how we are engaging with our community and continuing to educate them educate folks as they pursue new and interesting hobbies, educational opportunities, thought partnership. throughout their lifetime. So I don't know if that really answered the question, but what I want to say for me and for the work that I have the privilege of leading at the university, I'm really excited to look and see how we can work together more closely to help continue this commitment to lifelong learning with the programs that I oversee.
One of the things that you said was, like, what are you doing in your work about lifelong learning? And so it's interesting, we work on professional development all the time. Like, how are we keeping up with what's kind of the new and the trends and what's happening in higher education? That's kind of normal, I think, for any of our spaces, that we're always doing that and talking to our staffs. What's different about this place, which is just kind of fun for me, is that all of the community organizations and foundations and boards that our leadership team are members of. And that is another level of professional development and lifelong learning that was not available to me at my previous institution, that is really special about Grand Valley and Grand Rapids and the greater kind of West Michigan area. So I love that, and I want to put that out there. So if you have boards or foundations or committees that you're on in the community that you were like, oh, I feel like that student affairs person might have somebody that should be on that committee, I would love for you to reach out to me, because that is something that we're trying to do, not just at the highest levels of the institution, but kind of our leaders at the director's level as well. So I'm looking forward to that.
Great. Other thoughts?
Our job in the technology or digital space is to really help everyone complete their responsibilities and be more successful and provide more flexibility to people. I think the most complete college experience is when somebody comes to campus and experiences the events and games and spends time with their cohorts and fellow students and meets faculty. But lives and priorities change and they differ, and I think it's important for us to provide flexibility to people and understand that not all sizes fit equally, and perhaps we can reach out to folks where they are and enable and support some of the learning experiences, which then they can enhance, supplement back on one of our campuses.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, I hope that got some of the, oh, Laura,
I just
sorry.
was thinking of something that I felt compelled to share. I answered that from a professional perspective. I do just want to talk about that from a personal perspective for just a minute. In terms of my own journey to Grand Valley, I had a great career in Chicago. I absolutely adored the work that I was doing. But I had learned everything that there was to learn. I was at the top of my game. There wasn't really anywhere to go. And the only thing that was left to really think about was how to shorten the conversion time between feasibility study to selling of a campaign management services, because my conversion time was too long. Like, that's not a thing to learn anymore, right? That's not feeding the human spirit. That's not feeding one's personal passions. That's figuring out how to make a sale transaction happen in 2 weeks instead of 3 weeks. When I had the opportunity to start talking to this team, and I think you can see how much we respect one another and enjoy working with each other, when I had the opportunity to come to a place where I knew that I personally could learn, that I could sit on a team with folks who were passionate about learning, that I could have different perspectives on leadership, that I could learn what that looks like from the experiences or the lens of IT or public affairs or student affairs, nothing that I had had the opportunity to have exposure to before. That's really the essence of why I said yes to this opportunity, because I personally have a passion for lifelong learning. And I have to guess that that's part of the reason why you're here today too, because you have a passion for lifelong learning. So I just want to reflect on that personally. Professionally, this is very important to me, but personally, I hope that I'm in that audience years from now and still having the opportunity to learn from the good work that's happening at this university and the way that it's impacting this community. So didn't want to let the opportunity slip by.
Appreciate that. Other comments? Well, hopefully this started some curiosity, and I know none of you are ever shy with expressing that curiosity, so we will take questions from the audience, both here in person as well as online. If you have a question online, please drop that in the Q&A function, and we will monitor that as well. So if you have a written question and want to raise that up, or we have a microphone to carry around as well, questions? Great. This question is around standardized testing. So does GVSU use high school performance to predict GVSU performance? I guess it's not just standardized testing. So that GPA, are underperformers identified and proactively helped? Or does GVSU wait for the student to ask for help?
Yeah, good question. Do you want me to go for it? I'll try, because our expert on that is not here with us today, so our Dante Truss is our enrollment management VP, but I'm going to try to help. So yes, there are predictors that if you do well on standardized tests in high school, you might do well in college, and that is how like a lot of college admissions has worked over the years. But also over the years, because we've progressed as a society, and we realize that those standardized tests have a lot of bias built into them, and they're more about keeping people out of higher education instead of bringing people into higher education. And we had a lot of feedback on K through 12, my husband being a fourth grade teacher, that there's a lot of teaching to the test because the teachers have gotten so much pressure on making sure that students in K through 12 have certain levels of proficiencies. Is a very different world when they come to college, and we really want them to question their professors. And we're talking about learning how to think and being really great critical thinkers, when sometimes, not all the time, in K through 12, we're not teaching them those same strategies. So there's a huge learning curve about coming to college in general that those standardized tests are not predicting for us anymore. And so what's kind of, I think, a silver lining of COVID is that we stopped doing testing, like kind of nationally. Now, some colleges and universities are still using the ACT and the SAT as like predictors, but most of us have kind of gotten rid of it, and we're looking at things holistically now. What was your college prep curriculum? What were your grades? What kinds of things were you involved in outside the classroom? Did something happen in your life that affected the fact that you got a D in physics when you were a junior, but you ended up getting a B in Chem 2 when you were a senior? So it's a longer and harder process for our admissions folks to really look at the depth of the portfolio to understand where students are when they get here. And then the part that I'm probably not as familiar with academically is the support system that we put in place to help students once they get here. There is still, we have a million resources at Grand Valley, and so sometimes there still is an onus on the student to figure out where to go, but we're trying to flip that a lot more lately. To use some levels of predictors, like faculty right now, we're having their first tests. They can put in a system if a student didn't do well on a test, or if a student's not showing up for class, and academic advisors and coaches then reach out proactively to the student. So we've instituted a lot of that kind of outreach over the last, I would say, 5 to 10 years or so in higher education, because honestly, 20, 30, 40 years ago, it was all up to the student. And we've kind of flipped that. Like, are we ready? That's the provost, Lakers ready? Yep. It's not about, is the student ready for us? It's, are we ready for the student? And what are we doing to be a better Grand Valley to make sure that all of our students are succeeding? So I did that as not the enrollment management expert. Do any of my colleagues want to help? Okay.
Just two quick comments. One is we are currently working on building data analytics capabilities to look at causation and other influential factors to support students and learn of their challenges or difficulties earlier on in the process, not after they have left, because then in many respects it's too late for some of them. And the other thing, it's both a personal experience and having experienced it over 20 plus years across 3 universities. I think Einstein was attributed or quoted as saying, if you evaluate a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will spend its entire life thinking it's stupid, right? And that's generally how I personally feel about standardized tests and the way they were provisioned, the way they're done, access to students that they have to prep courses, to coaching varies significantly by socioeconomic status and many other things. So in many respects, standardized tests are not the best predictor of one's success. It's more grit, it's more what they've done over the last 4 years in high school, what other things they were involved in, and so forth. Those things will tell us a lot more than a number on a scale.
And I think you see evidence in some of our pipeline programs, and some, we touched a little bit on that earlier today. Some of the K through 12 involvement that we have is really understanding and centering the student voice. Future students being one of those audiences that Provost Mealy talked about this morning, really understanding where they're coming from and us being prepared for that, but really understanding that everyone's journey is so very unique, and how do we meet them along the way, challenge and encourage that success, which is not an easy thing to do when you think 22,000 people are coming with a different perspective and a different level of preparedness. But we are an institution that I think is very focused on that and very focused on understanding that and trying to do our best to meet those needs. So, great question. Laura, I'm guessing this might be most relevant to your area. So could you talk about what percentage of undergraduates are receiving financial aid? And I will add my own part on graduate students as well.
Yeah, 96% of our students receive financial aid of some sort, and that can be anything from Pell Grants to merit-based scholarships to donor-funded scholarships. So of the major majority, almost all receive financial aid of some type.
96%.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for the work that you do in the philanthropic area to supplement that. It's really important. And this group does a really great job of that too. So thank you, and a plug for your own scholarship and endowment to create difference in so many people's lives. 17 students, I think, last year. I'm looking at you, Simone, because I can't recall. But adult and returning learners were able to take on some education last year because of your generosity. So really appreciate that.
Yeah, I do happen to know it's 18% of all the financial aid that we are able to award does come from philanthropy. So almost $1 in $5 is contributed by our community to our students. It's absolutely incredible.
Which is unique because as a state institution, we almost operate in some ways like a private institution. Our percentage of support from the state of Michigan has grown, which leads me into the next question, which is if someone might be able to tackle what occurred in the state of Michigan legislature, which accounted for an increase in tuition dollars this year.
Sure, I can try to tackle that. That predated me, so I can take no credit for the increase in funding that came to Grand Valley. That was all your friend Matt McLogan, who maybe some of you knew as the Vice President of University Relations and had been here at Grand Valley advocating on our behalf in Lansing and Washington for decades. So he would be better suited, and perhaps he's watching. He could call in with an answer, phone a friend. But I would say finally the legislature in Michigan this past budget round recognized the need to better level set funding for the statewide universities. So no disrespect intended to a couple of the larger institutions in the state, but historically they received, I would say, a disproportionate amount of funding coming from Lansing. Matt and the colleagues that he works with in Lansing were able to move base funding for Grand Valley and a few other institutions up. But I would say that fight's not over. We need to continue to hold the legislature accountable to that. And that's a hard story to tell, especially, as I mentioned earlier, there is this national conversation about the value of higher ed. If I asked each of you how much did you pay a credit hour when you went to undergrad, it was probably less than what we charge our students today. And there's a million reasons that all make great sense. But what I can tell you is that the proportion that you had to pay versus what the state of Michigan paid is substantially different than what it is today, even with the success of this past round funding. So right now, Grand Valley's total cost for education is paid 18% by the state. 18%. So the rest of that comes, as Laura mentioned, from generous philanthropy, mostly philanthropy, and then tuition. So, we need to continue to fight the battle and to receive the funding that we deserve for the outcomes that we're creating for our students. So I will keep fighting that fight. And you can imagine, if you pay attention to politics, that fight or the teams change, right? Every election we have new leaders, new majorities, And there's a lot of education that goes on in Lansing to help our legislators understand the import of a higher education degree and the success for students who get a Grand Valley degree and why funding is so critically important. So every time we get an election, we get a new chance to teach our legislators about how great Grand Valley is and how important their funding is for us.
I think the more that we can continue to talk about education, higher education as a public good and not a private good, because I think a lot of folks now are like, well, then that person should just pay for their own if they're the ones that want it, instead of thinking about the collective economic impact, the collective impact of society, that as we as communities are more educated, what does that mean for us? So I think the public good versus private good conversation is a good one to have.
Well, we can see that play out in our own community right here. When you look at opportunities, I think of like the BHSH Nursing Scholars Program. I mean, we have had a nursing shortage in West Michigan. We've had a nursing shortage in the state, federally, or across the totality of the United States. And this was a really unique opportunity for folks within our community to come together and say, we need to solve this. How do we get to the other side of that? And so when you think about one organization within the community standing up and saying, we're going to support Grand Valley, we're going to support the opportunity for them to educate more nurses so that the totality of our community can benefit. And through that agreement, that partnership agreement, we have the opportunity to mint 500 new nurses over the next 5 years. That simply would not have happened without a couple of organizations saying, this is something that our community needs. This is a problem we can solve. If we all get inside of a room together, we're going to create great and deep impact just right here in West Michigan. So I think that that's a great example of working together to make change right here.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for that. Any other questions that we have? And I will do a quick time check. I think Milos and maybe some others had another commitment here, so just 1:30. But don't want to end this vibrant conversation. Other questions from the group? Nancy.
I was curious about whether any of you wish to say what you think about the whole student forgiveness debt and the huge controversy that has created, which I must say I didn't expect. So do you care to say anything about that?
I do. I mean, I don't think it's necessary for Grand Valley to weigh in on whether loan forgiveness is a good or a bad thing. We have our own story to tell about the value of education at Grand Valley, and we've been telling it for decades. I would argue we probably need to shout it a little louder to make sure that people understand when they're choosing to come to Grand Valley why that's a good economic choice, why the return on the investment that they will make is really high. So, I think it's always a little bit uncomfortable to be in a space where a lot of people have a lot of opinions about what we're doing and how we're doing it. Again, if you just read the newspaper on a daily basis or watch television, you can hear lots of opinions about what higher ed should or shouldn't be doing in the space. But it's pretty remarkable when you look back over the decades of the data we have and the financial acumen and just the responsibility that this institution has taken over the cost associated with education. So it's a great question. I just don't, and I'm not trying to avoid it, even though I am your official communications person, but I just think it's a space that we have our own story to tell rather than to be part of a narrative that frankly is a bit of a no-win because you have people on both sides of the particular issue.
I would say it goes back to the core of what we were just talking about, though. Like 30, 40 years ago, the state share of instruction, what the state was able to give institutions of higher education in order to educate the public was more, right? So so the reason why we're graduating students with more debt is because the eroding state share, right? So I think the solutions are controversial. Like, do we fix it on the front end? We fix it after people already have the debt? But the crux of it is still the same, is we are not investing as much into public higher education as we used to.
And I think we talk about it in the career world. Troy, we've had a lot of conversation about this. Not only is the disinvestment from the state happening, but there's a lot more placed on educational institutions. So, the training of folks to be career ready, there used to be apprenticeships. There used to be a lot invested in training and development by organizations. And now they're like, you in higher education need to prepare these people to come out, be job ready and ready to be productive on day one. So there is a lot that is placed, I think, on all of us in all facets of higher education, and it's part of the reason that it is expensive. It's growing. You need labs. You need application of learning. We know the value of internships and experiential education is part of creating a well-rounded individual. There's only so much you can do theoretically, so that application is there, and it takes time and money and investment on our institutions to stay competitive in that way.
I think to Laura's point too, that is why Grand Valley can be nimble and innovative with partnerships like with Spectrum Health, Beaumont Health, Cascade Engineering, Shape Corp. These are all companies in town that are willing to sit with us and think quickly and creatively around innovative results for students, right? And we've been doing that for decades again, but I don't think you see that in some of the larger institutions across the state. They're not willing to take risk or get comfortable with innovative partnerships the way that Grand Valley always has and continues to be.
Yeah, I mean, that partnership with Spectrum Health is a first-in-nation program. We surveyed the landscape and said, is there anything else like this that we could use as a potential model? We looked through the entirety of the literature that we could, scour throughout the United States. It's the only one. It's the only one that's like ours. And I think that does underscore our desire to partner with the community, but to partner with the community focused on, the quote, it's the economy, followed by a word that I don't let my young children use. But, that we will partner in ways that drive talent development, that create our pipeline, and that advance our community. I absolutely think that's a differentiator for us.
Wonderful. Looks like we have another question.
I'm wondering, one of the other areas that seems to be needing new people is education. And we have had a very good education program, but we haven't really had that kind of partnership that has permitted people who want to become educators to have support, both while they're in college and afterwards. What is Grand Valley doing in that area to increase the number of educators and our support for them?
I think Kara's going to take that for us because she's a rock star.
With special guest, Kara.
Yes. First off, I would say we recognize the same problem that you just raised. And so a couple things that are happening within our College of Education and Community involvement, which is, one, our current pathway for new K-12 educators has really been we don't call it a 4+1, but it's sort of a 4+1, right? And so you get that graduate teacher certificate after you get your bachelor's. There's work going on right now with our faculty to actually make all of that achievable within a bachelor's degree, so that shortens the path, right? The other thing that they're working really hard on is ways to help paraprofessionals and substitutes get to that teacher certification as well. One of the catch-22s, particularly, and I will say this was something new to me when I came back to Michigan. When I think about a substitute teacher, I think about someone who, Mrs. Smith is sick, so, Miss Lindsay is going to come in and show you a film strip. So that's my age, I guess. But that sort of thing. I was floored when I found out that in the state of Michigan, substitutes can be full-time teachers of record for up to 6 years. And then we fire them. and make them wait around, and then we rehire them to do it all over again, right? With no real path to actual teacher certification. And so we are working actually with a number of our public school partners and our charter system, as well as just within our College of Education, to say, how do we create programs where working teachers who don't have that certification have a path to earn that certification while they're still working, and don't have to, as they do in many parts of the country, have to quit their job to go back to school. So we are absolutely tackling it. It's one of our top priorities.
I'd also share the incoming chair or current chair of the Board of Trustees, Sue Jandernoa, is a 30-year teacher in K-12, and I know she is extraordinarily focused on what Grand Valley can be doing to do innovative partnerships like we did with Spectrum to really grow and, to Kara's point, enhance the opportunity for teachers in the state.
Any further questions at all? Wonderful. Well, before I invite Pat up to wrap up and conclude our day and give some comments on the logistics for our tour on Wednesday, I just would like to invite you all in helping me thank Milos, Jenny, Stacie, and Laura for their time and insights today.